Welcome to another episode of Centre Pass Extra, the show that takes you behind the scenes of the ANZ Championship. More Foxtel All-Star team with Kathryn Harby-Williams on this week's show, but first, let's reflect back on round 13 with the top 5 performers of the week. Speaking of big performers, it's now time to talk about the All-Star team once again with Kathryn Harby-Williams. Kathryn, last week we talked about the goal shooters and the goal attacks. Today it's all about the mid-court positions. Let's quickly look back on who our selected athletes were in 2011 and 2012. Just last year it was Madison Brown in wing attack, Laura Langman the choice in centre, and Julie Corletto, a member of the Melbourne Vixens back then, on wing defence. The year before it was Emily Beaton from the Thunderbirds at wing attack, Natalie Von Berto, her Thunderbirds teammate, in the centre, and Northern Mystics star Kayla Cullen on wing defence. Kathryn, no player since the All-Star team has been introduced for 2 years has been in the All-Star team on consecutive years. So it may change this year with the mid-court positions, particularly when we start talking about the wing attack position. Fair to say, Madison Brown, outstanding, a standout performer week in, week out. And
continued on from last year. So when you pick wing attack, Madison Brown's the first person to come to mind. She's been magnificent. Number 1 in goal assists, number 3 in centre pass received. So she's done everything required of her for the Vixens. But what I like about her game is not only is it her attacking side and ability to cut onto the edge of the circle, it's her defensive game. Sometimes she goes unnoticed in terms of what she does, but she's always on her player, hassling, just forcing a turnover, which sometimes doesn't go appreciated amongst the wider audience, but I certainly know that her teammates appreciate the efforts that she put in.
She sits in the top 5 for pickups, and she's a wing attack. She's the only attacking player that sits so high in that. So, as you mentioned, the defensive game is spot on. What do you think it is about Brown, particularly the past 2 seasons, that have seen her take that huge step forward?
Yeah, I guess everyone has a breakout year, and she'd been around a while, sort of been coming good, and everyone had talked about her potential, but never quite realised it. But I guess there comes a point where you've got enough experience, you've played enough games, and you really start to believe that you've got a place amongst your teammates and amongst the competition. And I think that belief came to her last year, and she has not looked back. An absolutely standout wing attack, and doesn't throw the ball away much. And I would rather wing attack get the ball less and keep possession of the ball than constantly get the ball coming to her and throw it away. So, a great quality player.
Certainly a standout in that wing attack position. Some other names to mention, Harbs, and we'll just get your general comments on them. Liana Leota from the Central Pulse, a big year from her since her return. Chelsea Pittman started well for the Firebirds. Emily Beaton's been consistent for the Thunderbirds. Vanessa Ware, Courtney Tyree, a few consistent players in there too, but perhaps just not the same level as Brown.
No, for me it's Brown, and then Leota, and then the rest. And it's interesting because they're the likes of Brown and Leota. They're fast, nippy, in your face, cutting in and out type players. And I think that's the evolution now of the wing attack, because the shooting circle has that static goal shooter, and I think that's the way to go. Another player that stands out, who hasn't been consistent, but when she's on fire, she's very noticeable and can win a game for her side, and that's Verity Simmons from the Fever. She's one that really needs to start believing herself, because I think she's got a foundation there to be quite a quality player. Chelsea Pittman, a different style of player, has had some injury troubles, but is starting to come good for the Fibers, and as a result her team are travelling nicely. So you talk about a number of those other players, but it's Brown all the way, really.
Let's now turn our attention to the centre position, the important mid-court role of any team. Laura Langman and Natalie Von Berto, our previous 2 selected athletes in this. How have you seen those 2 players go head-to-head in form this year, Kath?
Yeah, look, Nat Von Berto at her best is as good as any in the competition, as good as Langman. I don't think either of them at their best are better than the other. They add so much, and the strength of both the games of those players is their defensive aspect. But I just think Langman's been more consistent. We know Nat's been troubled by injury, and she spent some time on the bench this season, which is an unfamiliar position for her, and I'm sure would have been frustrating for her. But Langman, even when the Magic weren't travelling well, she was standing up and delivering, probably not at the level we expect from her, but now that they're travelling really nicely, she's lifted another cog, and she's a terrific player, and again one of those players that rarely lets go of the ball. So Langman for me is the standout centre.
So outside of Laura Langman and Natalie Von Berto, some big names still in the mix there as well. Kimberly Green, of course, the co-captain of the New South Wales Swifts, a pretty good season from her for sure. Kim Revillion from the Firebirds in a breakout season for her, only 19 years of age on debut. Millie Lees from the Pulse, Jade Clark from the Canterbury Tactics. Also Philippa Finch, a pretty steady season for the Southern Seal. What are your thoughts on some of those athletes?
Yeah, look, you've got to look at some of those players like Lees. she's touted as a long-term silver third. She again needs to find consistency. You know, when she's solid, she just goes about her business and contributes to her team both defensively and in attack. But you just want more consistency. Ravilion, she at her best is exciting, and she's certainly a player of the future. Kim Green. She's had a pretty solid season, I think. You know, one of her better seasons. I just like her grit and determination. She's a good leader. She tries to drag her players through the mire, and it's been frustrating for her. But at her best, she's as good as any going around as well. So, you know, it's the experienced ones, I think. Langman, Von Berto, Green, who really stand out.
Some big names there in the mix for the centre position. Turning our attention now to the wing defence position, potentially almost a one-horse race in this one as well. Renee Hallinan from the Adelaide Thunderbirds has had an outstanding year. Before Ash Brazel got injured from the West Coast Fever, she was on fire, wasn't she?
I commentated on some of her games, and I had not seen a wing defence influence games as much as she was at wing defence. She was just, you know, both available in attack and defensively. The number of deflections and intercepts she was creating for her side was astronomical. So it was a real shame that she was struck down with an ankle injury. But yes, Renee Hallinan is the standout. She's been consistent. You know, ever since she didn't make that Australian side last year and then got called in because of injury, she hasn't looked back. So I think she'd be one of the first players selected for Australia if the team was announced tomorrow. So a terrific season from Hallinan.
Speaking of Australian players, of course, in the Diamonds team, Monia Gerard and Julie Coletto spending a bit of time at wing defence, both of them this year. How have you seen the form of those established players? Yeah,
it's interesting. Gerard just recently has come good and produced some games that we, you know, can recall that she used to put in on a regular basis. We don't see that consistency from her anymore, but that also is tied in with the fact the Swifts aren't travelling well. And Coletto's going to be an interesting one because she's been in a team that, you know, what have they won one game or something like that, and hasn't produced the form that we know she can. But if you put her into an Australian team, she's a different player. So, you know, you can't always judge the performance of a player in an ANZ Championship team. You have to take into account all of the elements and then decide whether or not they're worthy of a Diamonds call-up. So, you know, I'd certainly persist with her because we know at her very best she's a match winner.
It's been interesting this year with the wing defence position. A lot of teams having to use two players in that one position to combat some of the strengths of the wing attacks in the competition this year. Firebirds using two quite often, also the Vixens as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but I think it comes down to, you know, those dangerous wing attacks like Maddie Brown. When she's on fire, I don't think a wing defence has the fitness to go with her. So as a result, you need to create a game plan that is going to counteract the best teams in the competition. So okay, the Vixens are one of the best. So what do? We create a two-pronged attack. So McCulloch and Simpson, for example, from the Firebirds, and then the Vixens do it themselves with Curran and Eagland. You know, I don't know what that tells me. Simone McInnes is the coach of the Vixens. She was one of the best wing defenders going round at the time and perhaps in the history of the sport. She obviously knows that position well and thinks that perhaps wing defence is one of those positions where you just need fresh legs, someone to really get hands over the ball to actually create some opportunities for your circle defenders.
All right, Harb, some big names there in all three of the mid-court positions. Take us through, I guess, your tips. No need to name your team, your selection, should I say. No need to name your team exactly, but who are the ones that you like in those three positions?
Okay, well, I'm only going to put the names out there that should be considered. So wing attack, we've talked about Brown and Leota, should be in there as far as I'm concerned. Centre position, Langman, Green and Von Berto, the old-timers. Wing defence, Hallinan and Brazel before injury, and I can't find another wing defence to move into that group.
Some good selections there, Kath. I'm right on the same page as you. Brown's been outstanding in wing attack, as to Hallinan at wing defence, and I like all three mid-quarters in that centre position offering something different as well. So we look forward to their form over the coming weeks and how they progress in the finals before we make our big calls and make our announcement of our All-Star team. You two at home can join in the selection of the All-Star team. Jump on the ANZ Championship website and register your Foxtel All-Star team. It should be an absolute beauty. Thank you very much for all your insights once again, Kathryn. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Centre Pass Extra.